Good evening, punters, and welcome to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a punting perspective. This week, we will be breaking down round 6, and we've done very well over the past couple of weeks, looking to continue that on through round 6, and it's an absolute cracker of round, some really good matchups this week. Before we dive into the games, though, I did want to get into something very quickly, and I think it is pertinent to betting. The NRLs has sent out a memo to all 16 NRL teams this week. They mentioned that I guess some teams weren't playing in the spirit of the game in terms of the new rules, laying on the ruck a little bit too long, taking advantage of the one ref, and the whole rule changes were to make it, a bit more open, a bit more expansive, and a few more points. So the NRL sent out a memo this week to say that they will not hesitate in bringing down the hammer for teams that lay on the ruck too long, teams that have the 10-metre infringement, stuff like that, and they will not hesitate to sin bin them. So I just would like to say that, before we get into this games, I certainly have a lean towards the overs, especially earlier on in the round, where I think they're really going to want to make a point of that new memo that got sent out. Jacob, how are you?
I 100% agree. You've got to think they implemented new rules after the lockdown. The whole purpose is more line breaks, more tries, more high-scoring game, more exciting footy. And the games haven't been that much more high-scoring, so I think they're really doubling down on it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they really are trying to, give a lot of more advantages to the attacking team and trying to ultimately result in maybe an extra try per game. So you want to be very brave taking unders,
yes.
And we are not taking many unders. We're a quarter of the way through the season, and we are over 60% winners on best bets. So it's been an awesome season so far, especially I think we're 66% since the break. One other thing tonight that's unique, we're going to be taking quite a few mechanical bets, and there is a reason for that. Two of the major bookies, Neds and Lads, are giving out $2 odds on both sides of the line, and that does give us an advantage. So just going to explain mechanical bets one more time. It's where you bet on more than one outcome to produce a combined result that is basically the same as one bet. Like if you bet on a team plus 3.5 and a bit on plus 4.5, obviously if the higher odds bet wins, then you're going to be sweet, you're going to win both. But if the game falls between the two, you might still get your money back. So you're going to see us taking advantage and either taking exact margins or betting on mechanical multiple lines to get a result. The reason is we're not doing it just for no reason to increase our win percentage by 1%. We only ever do it if it's worth it through a key number. The most key number in rugby league is 6, especially a favourite if they're favoured by close to 6. This season, how many games have we had? 40, and there's already been 3 games landed exactly on 6. So I believe that happens at least 5% of the time. So if you can get through the key number of 6, you can win 5% more often.
And when we do get to those mechanical bets, I will go through them pretty quickly. So if you are watching this on a phone or if you're watching it on a laptop, feel free to just take a quick screenshot so that you have those percentages there with you when you put the bets on after the pod. Let's get to Thursday night, Jacob. It's the Knights up against the Broncos. The Knights are 6.5-point favourites. The total is sitting at 38.5 points. This should be a really interesting one. The Broncos, I thought, put in a really good effort last Thursday night against Manly, up 18-zip, and they, for all money, looked like they were going to win that one, and just tired in the second half. I guess that's kind of what we expected, missing a few forwards. They get back TPJ this week, so, this Broncos side is slowly getting a bit closer to full strength, I guess. They do get the extra rest. But look, this Knights team is still pretty solid. And I mentioned last week that it was a good spot for the Storm and it was a bad spot for the Knights. So I'm not going to hang that on the Knights too much, that loss against the Storm last week. The Storm were clinical. I mean, they, had 90%, I think, completions. I think they only made 6 errors, conceded 3 pens. So to lose to a Storm team like that is certainly not disgrace. But this is the game where they're going to make a point of this, memo that got sent out. So look, I like the over here as well, and it would not surprise me if I see a sin bin in this game, if not in the first half.
That's right. They will want to make a point of it. So there should be points in this game. The Knights not disgraced last week, and they get back Fitzgibbon, so they're even stronger. Obviously, the Broncos get back Pangai Jr. off a suspension and Alex Glenn off that injury. But losing Katoni Staggs to a hammy injury in training is brutal. He's really important. I don't know how. Their 2 centres in this game are Herbie Farnworth and Darius Boyd. I don't know how they're going to stop the likes of Bradman Best and Kalen Ponga coming at them. And on paper, it's quite an even game, but where it's not even is the superstars in Kalen Ponga and Mitchell Pearce. I think they're the difference. Also think you're getting a good team in the Knights off a double-digit loss, while you get to go against a Broncos team off a heartbreaking loss. So it's a good spot. And the Broncos' biggest advantage they've had in 2020 is when their pack dominates. This Knights team is a very good group of forwards. It's very hard to dominate against. So that's why we like the Knights and over game.
We've just got the two best bets on this one. Actually, we've got two on this game, one for next week. We are taking the Knights in the race to 20 for this game. That's $1.83 on Sportsbet. We're going to take a mechanical Knights laying 4 points at $1.80. Your main stake will be on Bet Easy, and your partial stake will also be on Bet Easy. And then next week, we've got an early best bet. We are going to take the Knights laying 1 point against the Cowboys. That is $1.88 on Bet Easy as well.
And we'll get into why we like the Knights. We've just said we like them this week, but we also don't like the Cowboys, to spoil ahead.
Yes.
I guess in future you can say what the lines are that we're getting, but you don't have to get bogged down in the percentages.
Sure, fair enough.
But roughly we're laying -5.5, and we're taking an exact margin of 4. Exactly. Is that right?
Correct, yep. Yes. Let's get on to the Rabbits against the Warriors. The Rabbits are 7.5-point favourites. The total is 40.5 points. The Warriors, what a surprise packet. And look, I'll say it early on. I like the Rabbits in this one. It makes me kind of sad because I saw a nice story about the Warriors today that are helping out some dogs that are in the pound trying to get adopted. So I feel bad going against this Warriors team. They've done a lot of good for this NRL comp. But look, I'm high on this Rabbitohs side. I think they're underrated. They came up against two very, very good teams first 2 rounds back. And even though they beat the Titans last week, I thought they did look good. But I think the average punter looks at that game and says, they just beat the Titans. That's no big deal. Where else they've seen the Warriors play some pretty good footy. And look, this Souths team, am I crazy, Jacob, to say that the Souths 1, 6, 7, and 9 in 1 month is probably going to be the best 1, 6, 7 and 9 in the comp if they're fit?
Yeah, I don't think you are crazy with the way Latrell is head in the game and how fit he's gotten.
So I really like this Rabbitohs team. Now the Warriors beat the Cows last week. It was an impressive performance. They made a point of running at JT, and that's why he sort of got tired, had to make a bunch of tackles. So, I mean, I think that the Warriors played well, but in saying that, I still do not think that they're anywhere near the level of this Rabbit side. And I think the Rabbits will not overlook this Warriors team. They're 2-3. They need this win. I think the Rabbits cover the spread here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Warriors fans. We seem to be betting against the Warriors every week. But the truth is, this is more of a play on the Rabbitohs. As you say, they're kind of hiding in the long grass. This actually is a really quality team. Latrell is getting it together and proving his position at fullback. Cody Walker, instant improvement into this team for what he does for them and in the new conditions. He's just tailor-made for this style of footy, as is Cam Murray getting moved back into the middle and into lock. And there's a couple of key outside backs that might play in this game. For the Rabbitohs, James Roberts, and for the Warriors, Fusatua. I actually think Fusatua is an even more important in for the Warriors, but regardless, I think last week the results were a bit skewed in that Warriors were trailing with 20 minutes to go against the Cowboys, win by double digits. The Rabbitohs were up by 20 at halftime and only won by 20. So those results could have got a lot more extreme in the second half, but as you say, people maybe aren't recognising that this Rabbitohs team is a serious finals contender. So we're going to jump on them here. They should be too good.
We are. We've got 4 best bets, early best bets on the game. We are taking a mechanical Souths laying 5.5 points. It ends up being $1.82. You're going to take the -7.5 at $2 on Ladbrokes and on Neds. And you're going to take Souths to win by exactly 6 at $21 on Bet365. We're also going to take South's team total over 23.5 points. That's $1.85 on Ladbrokes and Neds. We're also going to take South's team total over 11.5 in the first half. That's $1.88 on BetEasy. And we're going to take South's laying 3.5 points in the second half. That's $1.83 on Unibet. Let's move on to the Panthers up against the Storm. The Panthers, that is a wrong graphic. But anyway, the Panthers are plus 5.5 points, not -5.5. I'm sure you guys that have been listening for a while probably know that. And a low total, 34.5 points. And the total probably does seem a little bit low, but we all know that this Storm D is legit. And this does seem like a game that could go to the absolute grindhouse. And it's funny, this in most weeks this could be game of the round, but there's a couple of other absolute crackers this week. So I really like this Panthers side. I think Cleary now second week back. But the thing is, they kind of had a brutal game, and I said, brutal game against the Eels last week, and they looked like they're really tired there in the second half. So do I expect a little bit of a letdown here? Maybe, because the Storm, you always play a fucking tough game against the Storm. Now, the Storm, pretty impressive win against the Knights, and I will say that a lot of people will want to lay the 5.5 in this one, and I can understand why, but I would just say, that the Storm played an absolute clinic last week. And look, I know that they could reproduce that, but 90% completion, like I said earlier, only 6 errors, I think, 3 pens, and so that's a really, really solid game by the Storm. So for me, this does look like a line that, it seems pretty much about right for me. Maybe I'd, take 6.5 with the Panthers, maybe I'd lay 3.5 with the Storm. So I'm happy to pass this one.
Yeah, we won our bets on the Storm last week, or at least I think 3 out of our 4 bets. The Storm covered the line easily. Cameron Smith, there was talk, should he go to 7? He showed everyone he's still the best hooker in the game, and that game was tailor-made for him. Grinding style, he controlled it. Riley Jacks did his job in the 7, retains that jersey. So they're unchanged. Panthers bring back Dylan Edwards, which I think just boosts them a little bit more, slightly better playmaking fullback, and can support the half chances that they might create. But for me, the biggest factor is the letdown of what was the most physical game of 2020 last week for a young side to get back up and reproduce what was an awesome effort. I would argue that Panthers loss was the most impressive loss any team has had this season, in that you watched them lose, but you came out of the game probably thinking even more highly of them. But this Storm team, to me, feels like they're building and getting a little bit better every week. They didn't peak last week. They did what they needed to do after getting out to an 18-point lead. The line just seems a little bit too high to want to lay the points with the Storm, as you suggested, but I can't take the Panthers plus, even if you could get +6, 6.5. I just can't be certain that they can reproduce last week's effort, so we're staying away.
No best bets for Panthers Storm. Let's move on to the Titans up against the Dragons. 16th versus 14th on the ladder. The Titans are 4-point underdogs, and the total sitting at 42.5 points. Another game where I would probably have a slight lean to the underdog here. The game's being played at Suncorp Stadium, slightly less travel for the Titans, but both of these teams are pretty putrid. I know that, we won money on the Dragons last week, and it was the prime spot, just being absolutely bashed all week long, or for multiple weeks now. So, a lot of people are going to expect a similar performance out of this Dragons side, and there is reason to believe that. There is a thing called losing streak theory, and once you've lost a bunch of games in a row and you finally get that first win, it's like a weight that's lifted off the players' shoulders. There's not as much pressure on them, and they can play a little bit more freely. So that's something that could happen to the Dragons here. But even if it does, you're still looking at 4 points, against a Titans team that's not actually that terrible. So the line probably seems about fair at 4. At 4.5, I'd probably lean towards the Titans, but you'd lean towards the Dragons at 3.5, Jacob, and that's why we have no play here.
Except we're going to go head-to-head, because I do think that one thing about the Dragons, when they get behind, they are a confident side, that they are the kind of team that will fold. An example is like the Bulldogs game or the Warriors game, where they kind of give up in them, whereas the Titans under Holbrook might keep fighting when they're down. But this is the kind of game where the Dragons might not necessarily be down. I think they're slightly better side. You look at the Titans, bring in Corey Thompson. I love Corey Thompson as a player, veteran leadership, and lays it all out in the field. But you've reshuffled your spine yet again for the Titans, whereas the Dragons, obviously, with a huge game out of Dufty last week, at least they kind of know a little bit more so what they're doing, and that's why I could have even laid a -2, whereas you would have been inclined to take Titans plus 4.5, so we've gone for a side bet at 3.5. So knowing how our side bets have gone this season, you should probably bet on Dragons to win by exactly 3 or 4.
Yes, true. So we have a side bet on there, and let's move on to the Tigers up against the Cowboys. The Tigers are laying 2.5 points, the total sitting at 40.5 points here. And this one's one of the rare games where you actually do get a legit home team, this game being played at Campbelltown. So once again, no crowds down there in New South Wales, but still probably about a point advantage to the Tigers here. And look, it's a funny one. This Tigers team, they have had a bit of reshuffle, and Reynolds has been named again in the halves, which I don't necessarily agree with, but Benji in the reserve, so who knows whether they're going to switch that around at game time. But I do think towards the back end of the season, you are going to want Benji in there. In terms of this Cowboys side, geez, they have been a little disappointing. I mentioned last week that all of their games since the restart had been in Townsville. The first game that they play away, they look pretty woeful. And now you have to play away again. You lose Valentine Holmes, you lose Jordan McLean. And I think that, you're probably not getting 100% Jason Taumalolo in this one. Just coming back, obviously, and also had to work bloody hard last week, making a shitload of tackles. So I think the Tigers will look at the Warriors' blueprint from last week, try and run it a little bit more at JT. I just think that, the Tigers and the Cowboys are probably even teams without the injuries that the Cowboys have. Plus, you get at home for the Tigers. I think you just got to take it. I think they should be probably, closer to above the 2.5, but we got a good line here.
Yeah, you've touched on the key factor. And speaking of getting a good line, which you can reveal now or in a minute or whatever, but if you're in our group, I posted this on the Friday thread. As soon as I saw Valentine Holmes get injured and McLean soon after, you could have got the Tigers +4 at $1.90.
Yeah.
+4 just a week ago, and they're a favourite now. They're -2.5 in places. That's a 6.5 point line move.
We
didn't take it as a best
out.
bet,
but they just go like that,
Yeah, but if you were in the group, there was an opportunity to get on that for maybe a half-hour window there. That's just one of the advantages of being in the group, interacting with us.
Yep.
Now, you touched on the key factor in this game. How do you handicap the teams? I mean, I look at the forward packs and try and figure out which forward pack is going to dominate, but I don't know the condition of Taumalolo.
Yep.
Clearly, last week he wasn't 100%. He's got this bone bruising, and I said they should not have played him last week. They rely on him so much. You played him before he was fully fit, and he lost anyway.
Yep.
You could have freshened him up, and he could have been the game changer in this one. So, in saying all that, Luke Garner back in. Luciano Leilua has an ankle problem, but I'm comfortable with that even if he doesn't play. The Cowboys, it is two big outs in Holmes and McLean. This Tabuai Fidow is an excitement machine at fullback and a bit of speed there. But at the same time, it's still only his second ever NRL game and he has to start at fullback. It's a big ask. I think the Tigers have more experience in key positions. And I hate getting a worse number that, like I said, when it was +4 last week. But I still think, as you said, with home advantage and travel, the Tigers should win this game. So we've got to lay a very short number.
Hate getting a worse number, but we are getting the best current number, as we do with all the best bets that we give out. We're taking 2 at the moment. We're taking the Tigers laying 1.5 points. You'll find that one at $2 on Ladbrokes and on Neds. And we're going to take the Tigers straight up in the first half in a two-way market. That one's $1.80 on Sportsbet. Let's get on to what should be the game of the round. It's the Roosters up against the Eels. The Roosters are laying 6.5 points and the total is 36.5 points. This is my favourite bet of the round. I love the Eels here, and honestly, call me crazy, but I don't understand how this line is above a converted try. This game is at Bankwest Stadium. It's home game for the Eels. I think you can probably give them a point and a half for Bankwest there. So you're saying that the Roosters are really 7 to 8 points better than this Eels side that's undefeated in 2020. I don't think so. I know that the Eels get a couple of extra days to turn around for this one. I know we mentioned before that they had that brutal game against Penrith, but I think that, Penrith may suffer for that a little bit more, but you watch how the Eels came back there in the second half. So I think that they're a lot of a fitter team than Penrith, so they're going to be fine for the turnaround. The Roosters, bit of a disrupted, approach to this game. They had to play on Monday instead of the Sunday game against the Bulldogs, even though that was pretty much a training run here. Kane Evans suspended, which obviously does not help. But look, I know people have given me shit. I've seen a lot of YouTube comments giving me shit about me being high on this Eels forward pack. But I love this Eels forward pack. They run the ball bloody hard every time. And honestly, I think that this Eels forward pack can match the Roosters forward pack. I think the outside backs can match them. And I think the halves can match them just as good. So give me over a converted try. I love the Eels in this one.
Yeah, you said to me that the Eels are your favourite play of the round, and you can't understand why they're so high. And I said, is taking the Utah Jazz against the Chicago Bulls your favourite NBA play of the because this Roosters team is the Chicago Bulls, and they are going for a three-peat, and they are historically good, and you feel dumb betting against them. And in saying that, let's rewind. Round 1, we bet against the Roosters. They lost outright. Round 2, we bet against the Roosters. They lost outright.
Yep.
After the long layoff, we recognised the Roosters were going to come out and actually start playing for real. We were on them in round 3. They won easily. And they were on them in round 4. They won 59-0. But then we had a slip up. We took the Dogs plus 18.5, and they were down 18 within the first 10 minutes, and it was game over. And yeah, you feel dumb going against this Roosters team. They're an absolute juggernaut. And even in that game, we're Hargraves, bit of a back tweak. Let's give him a freshen up. And he didn't play. Like, they can prime themselves for these games. I also think when top 4 sides meet, because the top 4 positioning is so key in winning the comp in how it plays out in the finals, in a short season, these games are worth even more. That's why the Roosters wanted to ask the NRL for an extra 24 hours for this one, because they are taking this game very seriously. So a 5-day turnaround for the Roosters. Obviously, there's an advantage there to the Eels, but I think that's mitigated by the fact that Eels' last 2 matches have been dead set warfare. They have gone, right down to the wire and won both against Manly and against Penrith, 2 legit teams. What I like about the Eels, though, is you can argue they have not put together an 80-minute performance in the last 2 weeks. They blew an 18-2 lead, or nearly blew it, depending on, on that final touchy decision.
Yep.
And then last week, it took them 60 minutes to wake up. So I do think maybe they can go to another level. They'll need to compete with the Roosters here. But as you say, to get over a converted try when we really believe the Eels are special, and I don't think you're crazy talking about their forward pack, and they got Nathan Brown back last week, and he took them up a level as well. I agree it's the game of the round. I'm expecting a ripper, so we've got to take the points with the Eels.
And you said you have to take the dog in the game of the round, and this should be the game of the round. We are taking a Mechanical Eels plus 8.5 points, ends up being $1.80. We're going to put our main stake on plus 7.5 points at $2 on Ladbrokes and on Neds, and we're going to put the remaining stake on Bet Easy. We're going to have Roosters to not score 3 unanswered tries. That is $1.90 on Bet365. And we're going to play either team to win by 1 to 10 points. That is $1.91 on Sportsbet. Let's move on to the next best game of the round on paper. It's the Raiders up against the Seagulls. The Raiders are laying 4.5 points. The total sitting at 35.5 points. Another one of those games with 2 potential top 4 finishes for this year. And you mentioned, Jacob, you think that this Raiders side is a little bit overrated, and I tend to agree with you. I mean, they eke out a win against the Tigers, but I think if they came up against a better team that maybe could have capitalised on possession a little bit better, especially in the first half, then it could have been a different story. So the Raiders haven't really impressed me since the restart. The Sea Eagles, I mean, they get the win against the Broncos, and I think more than anything, that's a bit of a confidence-boosting win. To get a lucky win like that when you're down 18-zip, and I think that they'll be able to go into the locker room after that, longer prep than the Raiders, and address a few issues and not come out complacent in this one, that's for sure. So, look, I think that, to be honest, I see these teams as fairly comparable, and the Seagulls get a couple of extra days prep. So I like getting the 4.5 here with the Seagulls, and I think we've done a little bit better than that. But it should be a cracking game. I really thought this game would come out at about 2.5 points. So to see it at 4.5, I think we have to take the dog here.
And don't forget when I said the Raiders were overrated. I said it when no one else was saying it.
True.
Before they lost by 16 as a $1.30 favourite that coming week to the Knights. Now that they've, a couple of the warts and the shortcomings of this team have been shown, both these sides ground out wins last week when they were trailing at halftime. And you're right, they are pretty evenly matched teams. And I think, no doubt, Roosters, Storm, Eels, I really believe they're all top 4 sides.
Yep.
Well, 5 doesn't go into 4. So, games like this, as I just said last one, but Raiders Manly, that can ultimately decide if you get 2 lives in the finals or get a chance for a bye and a home prelim. It's so big. And when these 2 teams get it on, they just produce crackers. How many times have these 2 gone to extra time recently? They just seem to always bring out the best in each other. But I do understand why the Raiders are favourites. I really think it's about the injuries to Marty Tapau and Moses Sully. And that is why I understand that the Raiders should be favourites. I really love the fact that the Raiders, the focal point of their attack is Whiten and Hodgson in 6 and 9. But the focal point of the Manly attack is their 1 and their 7 in Turbo and DCE. I think it's going to be a fascinating encounter. It should be a grind of a match. I mean, we're tentative to play unders with the new rule interpretations that we spoke about at the start of the pod. But we are probably just getting too many points with Manly, so we're going to have to take them in what should be another really good game.
Indeed, we've got 2 best bets for now. We're taking a Mechanical Manly plus 7 points. That ends up being $1.82. We're going to put our main stake on Manly plus 7.5 on Bet365. We're going to put the remaining stake on Manly plus 4.5 at $2 on Ladbrokes and on Neds. We're also going to take Manly plus 2.5 in the first half. That is $1.88. Also on Ladbrokes and on Neds. And the final Sunday game is the Sharkies up against the Bulldogs. The Sharkies are 5.5 point favourites. The total sitting at 37.5 points. And geez, what do you do with this Sharks team? I mean, we came into the season saying that they would be a little bit overrated. And I guess, the problem with the Sharks team is they usually suffer a bunch of injuries. Obviously, they haven't had like Moylan. They haven't pretty much been fully healthy the whole time. But it's just their actual on-field play is just not very good. And I mean, it was a bad spot for them last week. And look, I know that we had a lot of plays on the Dragons. They were the ugly duckling. Everyone was giving us shit for that. But it was a great spot to take the Dragons. So look, a lot of people will say, oh my God, the Sharks lost to the Dragons. But we probably don't see it that way. But even so, the Sharks have not impressed me this season. And I guess neither has this Bulldogs side. But I think that they can get up for certain games. And it's like once you start getting down against the Roosters, you know, it's tough. It's really tough to get back. So you don't hate taking a team, even a type of team like the Bulldogs, off an absolute drubbing, even though it's a shorter turnaround, but it's Monday to Sunday, so it's still 6 days. I really like the way that Foran's played recently. I think, you know, each game that goes by, he's going to get a little bit more match fitness. That first game, he looked absolutely spent, but I think he's going to get better each time, and I think it really does add something in attack to this Bulldogs team, because I really think that Lachlan Lewis is not a first-grade footy player. So Foran needs to get involved a little bit more, and I think, you know, the Bulldogs can keep this one pretty close on the last game of the round.
Funny thing about Lockie Lewis, I actually really rate his defense. He's tough as nails. He's got the Lewis gene in defense. When he kicks the ball, he has to come to a complete standstill and then kicks it. It is strange. Now, the Sharks, they've made the top 8 the last 7 straight years, but pre-season, one of our best season bets we gave out was Sharks to miss the 8. We picked that they'd have a tough year, and I can't take them in this game because it got guys missing, but the guys who are there, like Fafita, it's sad to see, but we called it. He's a shell of himself. His knee is not right. So when even your key guys who are out on the field are not the players they used to be, I don't think the Sharks have a big edge in the forwards when guys like him can't produce the form they used to. And I actually like the outside backs of the Dogs a bit more. Like, I really love Witeni Zalesniak. I really feel like he's like a sledgehammer into the line every carry, and you know, this Avarillo is talented. Remus Smith.
I like Remus Smith starting over me.
And I like and Hopewadi. Will Hopewadi is a legit playmaking fullback as well, underrated. So I really think the Dogs should be at least a 50% chance to win this game. You know, let alone we're getting them as an underdog. So to me, like, there's a lot of pressure on Johnny Morris there and Cronulla. It's just going to be a long season for them. We've said it over and over. And yeah, I don't take too much away from their demolition job against the Roosters because it was over before it even began. It was dead set, 12-0 after 5 minutes, 18-0 soon after that. If anything, I was actually impressed with the period they hung tough in that game against an absolute buzzsaw. So I think we're getting great line value again here with the Dogs.
Got 2 best bets for now. We are taking the Bulldogs plus 6.5 points. You'll find that one at $1.81 on Unibet. We're also going to take the Sharks to not score 3 unanswered tries. That one is $1.80 on Bet365. And that will do it for the round. Thank you guys for tuning in to our round 6 preview. There was a bunch of best bets there. They will get posted in the Tripod app tomorrow, probably either tonight or tomorrow morning. And then we will release the rest of our best bets in the Tripod app on Friday. But looking for another really good Friday or another really good round. That's 2 in a row that we've absolutely crushed it. So keep listening, and we'll be back on Sunday night to recap round 6. Thanks for tuning in.
Legal.